So in this video, let's focus on one specific common complaint or common issue that people have with panic attacks, and that's panic attacks while driving. How do we treat this? So I'm going to focus this video on one aspect, specifically how do we tackle the driving panic attack or the desensitization of panic attacks while driving. But there's really another component to this that's very important, because whenever somebody comes to me with this concern, I always want to know, are there other situations in which they get panic attacks? Because if they do, awesome. That gives us an opportunity to weaken the panic cycle before you actually go out there and do exposure while driving. But that's a whole different thing. Let's just focus on how do we tackle the panic driving. That does quite often show up as an isolated, like a specific phobia, right? Meaning isolated phobia or isolated panic attack or isolated situation where you get panic attacks. In other words, this sometimes people come to me saying that this is the only situation I get panic attacks in. So this is actually a very important video for probably a lot of people. So let's get into it. So the first thing we got to do, so there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things that are important when we're doing exposure, and this is exactly what we'll be doing. We got to do exposure, because to get rid of panic attacks, we have to create a corrective experience, right? To create a corrective experience, we have to get rid of safety behaviors. So safety behavior is the first thing. So safety behaviors it's the stuff you try to do to make the feeling go away. Because until you stop doing the stuff to make the feeling go away, your mind will not register that you're actually safe. I've mentioned this before in other videos, but I think this is very important to repeat many times. We all have kind of like two minds. One mind is super rational. It's the part of you that's listening to this video. It's the part of you that does taxes. It's the part of you that does math. It's the part of you that can quickly change its mind when new information enters your field. Then there's another part of you. There's another part of your mind. And this part of you only learns through experience. So for example, if you're in the kitchen and there's a pot and the flame is on and you touch it and you get burnt, that part is operating, right? You'll then turn off the flame. You got scarring on your fingers, perhaps, right? You got the bubbles are formed. It hurts, it burns. You don't like it. It's an unpleasant experience. You turn off the flame, you wait an hour, and then it's time to come back. Now, let's think rationally. An hour has passed, the flame's been off. Is the pot going to be hot? No, we all know that. Yet, when it's time to touch the pot, how do we touch it? Let me grab an object to pretend let's just pretend this is the pot, right? How do we touch it? An hour has passed, despite the fact that we rationally understand this is not hot. We never, and I don't know of a person who will just go up to the pot and be like, oh, grab it like that. Full confidence. Almost everybody taps it first. Why? You're actually reality testing. You got burnt. You learned that touching the pot causes pain. That part of you that only learns through experience registered that. Now you're reality testing it, right? You're nervous. You're approaching it because that part has not had a corrective experience. This is you reality testing it, and at the same time, a corrective experience. You're touching it. You're realizing it's not hot. Okay, it's ready to be grabbed. That's so that's an example of reality testing, and that's also an example of a corrective experience. Now, an example of safety behavior. So, hot pot, right? You got burnt, waited an hour, the flame was been off for an hour, you come back to grab it, but this time I don't have a glove, but imagine I have one of those oven mitts. You put on an oven mitt and you grab the pot. Do you ever get that corrective experience? No. The little behaviors we do while driving and having panicky feelings that we hope will calm down those feelings are like those oven mitts. They prevent us from getting that corrective experience. So what are those things? Those things are usually things like trying to control your breath, right? So, okay, if I breathe like this steadily, the feeling will go away, right? And eventually it does. Maybe you make it through the highway patch that freaks you out the most, and it goes away. And then that part that learns through experience, it just learned that, oh, that behavior I just did, the breathing thing, is probably what made me make it through. Or maybe you're worried about fainting, right? Sometimes people will have preoccupations. I'm going to be driving, I'm going to faint. And sometimes, they're basing this preoccupation based on past experience where they have actually fainted. But like 90% of the time, when people have had history of fainting, guess what? They didn't drink enough water, right? They were dehydrated. Maybe they didn't eat anything, and then they were running around all over the place, sweating, and then they just fainted, right? So a lot of times some people take a lesson from that I always have to be hydrated. So in the car, they'll be sipping water. They'll be sipping water. Okay, yes, and then their mind registers that experiential mind, the heart, let's call it, registered that it's the water that kept me okay. There's other stuff that people do. For example, people will like chant, where people will be like, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. Right? Reassurance, reassurance, reassurance. I only made it because I kept reassuring myself, right? That's another way that you can prevent yourself from having a corrective experience. And there's a million other ways that we could do this. So this is very important to identify. What are the strategies that we use to keep ourselves feeling safer while we're driving and panicking, right? Identifying safety behaviors. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to slowly be peeling them away. Now, if you can peel them all away at once, great. You'll make it through this exposure thing way faster. But typically we peel them away little by little, one by one. For example, if you're sipping water, we might not even remove the water bottle. We might just say, bring only this much water with you, like very tiny amount, right? Or whatever. You actually have to set the rules because we're simultaneously working on your willingness to face more and more intense situations, right? That's an aspect of the treatment that I'm not really going to get into because that would just take a whole other thing. But we would have you decide how much you are willing to risk, right? Because we're trying to build also simultaneously tolerance towards this discomfort, this fear. We're trying to help you change your relationship towards your fear because that's part of the problem. That's part of the panic problem. So safety behavior is one thing. The other aspect that's important is to create an exposure hierarchy, okay? So an exposure hierarchy is ways that we can titrate the exposure intensity for you, right? So on the one extreme end of this exposure hierarchy, we could cause a full-blown panic attack. Bam, it's happening, right? On the other end of this spectrum or this exposure hierarchy, we would only cause mild anxiety and discomfort, right? And then we have steps in between, escalating steps in between, right? Between mild anxiety, full-blown panic, right? So we have to do this with driving, right? So with driving on the surface, it might seem like this is a challenging thing to do, but there's stuff we can do. The first thing I typically do is I ask the person to identify a stretch of the highway road that has the shortest distance, the fastest travel time between the entrance and the first exit, right? That's one way to decrease the anxiety intensity and the exposure intensity. Another thing, most people with this kind of a problem, they'll also have a mental speed limit. As long as I drive under 50 miles an hour or 55 miles an hour or something like that, I'm okay. I can kind of make it. My anxiety doesn't rise to quite that level. So we can also control by speed, right? Lower speeds, lower anxiety, higher speeds, high anxiety. For some people, it might be a lot of people will probably be caught in the middle because they'll feel like I'm not keeping up with the traffic when I'm driving slower, so they're still feeling anxiety. But if I go any faster, I'm gonna get panicky. So they're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But we have a little bit of wiggle room somewhere in this range, right? So that's another way of titrating the exposure intensity. Something else we can do is we can control the time of the day that you drive. For most people, the fear of being stuck in traffic is the worst thing, right? I don't want to be stuck in traffic because a lot of times this crosses over into this agoraphobic kind of presentation where we fear situations where we can't escape, right? I don't want to be panicking here, right? For some minor cases, the inverse is possible. I feel worse when there is no traffic because that means there's no people around me. And if something happens to me, like for example, I might have a heart attack, I might have a respiratory emergency, or I might go crazy. No one will be there to help me, right? By the way, those are the three primary preoccupations people have during the state of panic: cardiac preoccupations, respiratory preoccupations, and derealized preoccupations, meaning I'm going to go crazy or I'm going to lose control over myself and do something stupid, right? So that's another aspect. So we want to have this way of intensifying, right? And there's other ways that I'm just not remembering right now, but those are the ones that come to my mind that we can use to titrate the exposure intensity. The next thing we want to do is usually the first thing I do is before you even get on the road, I have you find a spot, ideally if you can do this, that you can get as close to the entrance of the highway and just chill there and have a session right there to process your thoughts and your body sensations, right? So your thoughts will they'll probably contain the what if this happens, what if that happens, right? And then we do something else with those thoughts. We do something else that's called reality testing. So reality testing is it's like that hot pot situation, right? We're trying to do something to see if this is actually true or not. So that's what we would do for each of those what if situations. That usually calms the anxiety over time very quickly. Once we do a reality test, the correct reality test, the person calms down right away because they realize this threat is not actually real, right? Next thing we do is we also have to check in with the body, because the body always, with panic, it's always, the body will create sensations that we then associate an interpretation with. So for example, chest constriction, right? I can't quite get enough air, right? This might make us feel, what if I'm about to pass out? So then we have to reality test that. So the body contains clues to the what if thoughts that we typically have. So first we check in with the thoughts. Those are like right in your face, what if fears. But then there might be some other fears that you might have been, maybe you didn't vocalize to the therapist in that moment, or maybe you just weren't aware of. That's why we then check in with the body and we find out what's going on, what's cooking there, and then see if there's any fears associated with those symptoms. And then we reality test those. So that'll be like the very beginning of it. Then we repeat this at the lowest intensity version of exposure. That'll be the first step. So you actually get on a highway and maybe you're driving X amount of miles per hour to keep you as calm as possible. You're also, lane choices. That's another way of titrating. I forgot that one. Lane choices is another way of titrating the exposure intensity. So you might, for most people, it's driving close to the shoulder, right? That's the safest place because I can always pull over. Whereas in the middle lane, I'm stuck. Like if I get stuck, I can't quickly get to the shoulder. And in the left lane, I'm totally stuck because I have to jump 2 lanes, right? So you probably are driving also on the right shoulder, or in the right lane. You're going under a certain amount of miles per hour to keep you calm. And also you're driving at a preferred hour, whatever the hour is, low traffic or high traffic, depending on your situation. And then we repeat the process that we did when I first gave you the example of you standing right before the entrance to the highway, right? The whole process. So thoughts, we reality test those, we check with your body, we see what symptoms come up, and we see what are some of the associations with those symptoms, catastrophic associations with those symptoms. Then we reality test those. We rinse and repeat this until you feel confident to escalate the intensity of this exposure. And then we escalate the intensity of this exposure by perhaps, it's dealer's choice. You're the dealer. So you might say, you know what, I think I'm ready to increase the speed at which I will go in the right lane. Okay, fine. So we'll play with that. Repeat, rinse and repeat. Then maybe you're like, you know what, I think I'm ready to try to hop into the left lane and then hop out right away. We'll try that. Rinse and repeat. Process all the feelings, process all the thoughts, process all the bodily sensations, reality test, rinse and repeat. On and on we go until we escalate this to the maximum exposure intensity. And the maximum exposure intensity might be driving straight in the left lane for, 10 exits or something, right? So that's how we do it in a nutshell. I try to condense, this is like my 3rd or 4th attempt at recording this video, because I keep deviating into all the kinds of little details that are involved in exposure therapy and in just this panic treatment. But I think I managed to contain it somewhat well. I can feel it's not thorough. I know there's more I can tell you about this, but then this video is going to be ridiculously long. So I hope this gives you an idea of how working with this particular kind of a panic situation, driving, fear of having a panic attack while driving works. I don't know if I explained reality testing enough. If you're curious, leave a comment in the video. If I missed something, if I didn't quite clarify something enough, let me know. I will make another video clarifying it in the future. All right, have a good one.